Well, thanks for staying with us. Time now for Media Watch, which I'm joined by Rebecca Baring. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, Georgia.
Now, okay, so it's been a busy weekend here in France. Dominique Strauss-Kahn's back. Jacques Chirac is sick. The limelight has been stolen from other members of the government that way.
Absolutely. They're a little bit annoyed because the ruling UMP party's summer conference hasn't really had much of a look in. If we go to the computer, I'll show you an article here from Les Echos, which is a financial publication here in France. And there the journalist Guillaume Tabar is saying the UMP wasn't a media victim of DSK, as he's known here in France, and of Chirac, because he reckons that, in fact, these events were not reported really in proportion to how important they were. You know, sometimes we get a bit wrapped up with the razzmatazz, and actually we weren't talking about policy making this weekend. So the first thing, of course, that got the media in a frenzy was the return of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, his first time back on French soil since his arrest back in May on those sex assault charges. Of course, he touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport yesterday, Sunday, and then he went to his plush apartment in the Place des Vosges, and there journalists were, well, it was such a big crush, he could barely make his way to his own front door, and journalists have been commenting on everything from was he wearing a tie to how many suitcases he had to whether or not he was smiling. But for them, he didn't really offer up the goods. He didn't speak Georgia. He didn't give them the sound bite that they would have liked. And so, consequently, it was a little bit of a non-story, you could say. The other event that was making a buzz, we can see here on an English language website, the local.fr, of course, was Jacques Chirac, who was himself a bit of a non-story because he was a non-show at his trial this morning, which opened, his corruption trial opened here in Paris, and he couldn't go. On Friday, his lawyers sent a letter to the court containing a medical record which proved that he is losing his memory, and so consequently he wasn't well enough to attend. Judges ruled today that the trial will still go ahead, of course, but the importance of the case really is quite symbolic here in France. He's not a man who himself is really in the media spotlight anymore. He's 78 years old. He's not an active politician, and yet he's France's most popular politician since he stepped down in 2007. So some saying this case has to go ahead because otherwise it would be a travesty for transparency, and it is now the end of the blind eye era here in France. But certainly he proved much more popular than the ruling UMP party's event as well. It's the last of its kind before next year's presidential elections, of course, but the hullabaloo was elsewhere, and this was supposed to be a last-ditch attempt to show unity on the part of the UMP party, but that was undermined. You can see here in Le GDD, which is a Sunday paper, that there was a clash between Nicolas Sarkozy, the president, of course, and former Prime Minister Jean-Pierre Raffarin over a very serious topic, Georgia, attacks on theme parks. So it seems that actually ex-politicians, former political figures, are much more interesting to the French media than current ones.
Now, you were just mentioning there about the fact that Dominique Strauss-Kahn's announced that he's going to be remaining stumm for the moment. How long before the wait is over? How long before he sets his side of the story over?
According to Francois, it's going to be 15 days. As you can see here, I'm sure there are lots of people advising him not to speak at all, but the speculation is mounting that he probably will. Which paper will he talk to, though, or which television channel, perhaps? Or maybe it'll even be a podcast, and he can really give his side of the event. But I think there's a bit of a bidding war on as to who he's going to speak to and when he's going to speak. But will the French population actually care? Are they a bit saturated by this story? That's something else that's been up for discussion. He's had a mixed reception since he's arrived back on French soil, and we're pretty divided, apparently, about where he should go next. According to recent polls, the vast majority think a political comeback would not be a good idea.
Now, here in France, a lot of kids have headed back to school, and it looks like Twitter is going to be the latest educational tool being used.
That's right. About 50 classrooms across the country are rolling out the use of the microblogging site to help kids to read and also to help them to write. So Europe 1, this website, is using the example of a school, I think, that kind of kicked it off back last year. 6-year-olds, they're pretty young, have been using Twitter in a school in Dunkirk in the north, far north of France. And every day they kind of have a ritual tweet of the day, and they greet their followers, and they learn how to write things like the date. And and it's catching on elsewhere. And the teacher there, Jean-Roch Masson, he says that Twitter is a tool to help kids to kind of get out of themselves, to express themselves, and it helps to motivate them because it's more of a fun way of learning kind of the basics. They can exchange maths puzzles or riddles online, and then the teacher checks that they're all written properly. We can have a look actually at their Twitter feed. They haven't put anything on here this morning. It was the first day back, so maybe that was a bit ambitious. But you can see that they're all the tweets are written properly. I don't know about you, Georgia, but when I tweet, I often use sort of contractions because it's only 140 characters. The idea here is to get away from the kind of text speak that, you know, a lot of teachers are saying kids are falling into the trap of writing everything in sort of 2 or 3 letters. And the teacher makes sure that they're all written properly. So if we follow them, we might get some lessons in how to write proper French grammar.
Probably a very good idea. The more I contract, the more I also find myself making horrendous spelling mistakes. But moving on, so we're going to finish on a fake coffee advert that's setting tongues wagging here in France.
Georgia, I've brought you a little bit of toddy for the end of this segment. Echo 89, which is a blog, an economy blog on the website Rue 89 news site here in France, is writing about a fair trade organisation based in Switzerland called Solidar, and this is their campaign featuring a George Clooney lookalike. I'm going to play it for you, but we can actually watch it probably in full screen in a moment. But the idea is that, of course, George Clooney in Europe is the face of Nespresso, the very posh coffee brand, and these guys want us to petition him to sign a petition to get Nespresso to stop exploiting coffee pickers. They say that that's a problem with the company. They compare the treatment of coffee pickers with getting hit in a rather sensitive parts of the anatomy. So let's take a closer look.
Sorry, George. Mais un cueilleur de café exploité ressent la même chose que toi. Nespresso est l'un des cafés les plus chers, mais il ne s'agit pas d'un café équitable. George Clooney peut changer cela. Écrivez-lui à solidar.ch.
And just to translate that for you, the ad said, "Sorry, George, that's what it's like to be exploited as a coffee picker. Nespresso is one of the most expensive coffees, but still not fairly traded." And it says, go to solidar.ch for more information where you can sign that petition and get George to put some pressure on Nespresso to start treating coffee pickers fairly.
Well, that's one way of getting George Clooney thinking. Oh, thanks very much for that roundup, Rebecca Bowering. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, all the latest making it big online. It's Web News.
Every week, France 24 brings you all the latest news from the world of sailing and water sports. Follow the action from the major international sailing events. Catch up with the latest technological advances from the boat shows. Join us. Become part of the crew. Connect with the world of sea lovers and water sports enthusiasts. Follow the Call of the Sea with Whirlwinds, Saturday, 12:40 p.m. Paris time on France 24.
4, 3, 2, 1, good start.